Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Clark, research analyst for Money and Markets, with your Money Markets Week Ahead, what to watch on Wall Street. This week's going to be a relatively quiet one on the markets, at least in terms of data and earnings. Companies are winding down the most recent quarter and ramping up for the next round of quarterly earnings, which is expected to start here very soon. There's a notable IPO to launch this week, but even that calendar is pretty blank. Here are some things that investors are going to watch out for next week. Speaking of the IPOs, the IPO calendar, like I said, fairly light this week. One notable initial public offering is scheduled for this week. OTR Acquisition plans to launch its IPO on Monday. Perhaps the biggest deal here is that OTR is using only one book runner for the deal, Maximum Group LLC. Now, typically when you launch an IPO, you'll use a couple different book runners, not just one. This one's only using one. Now, OTR Acquisition, quite simply, is a company that's a special purpose acquisition company, or a SPAC, that essentially is a shell company that has no operations and it only has a sole intent of acquiring funds to then go out and either possibly make a company go public by acquiring it in a reverse merger. According to Renaissance Capital, the company is led by Nicholas Singer, who's a former co-founder of Cyrus Capital Partners and Standard General. Now, the Miami, Florida-based OTR plans to sell about 25 million shares at a target price of around $10 a share. That would raise, obviously, $250 million in acquisition capital. At that proposed price, OTR acquisition would see a market value of right around $315 million. Now, if you remember, I recently recorded an episode of the Bull and the Bear podcast where I discussed just what SPACs are. Make sure you can look in the show notes and check out the link to the video on that, or you can look at our Money and Markets YouTube channel, and you can see it clearly described as SPACs, and you'll get a kind of a good overview as to what special purpose acquisition companies are. But basically, they've been around since the early 2000s, but they've just kind of started to become all the rage in the field of initial public offerings. In 2015, only 20 SPACs went public, and that number jumped to 59 in 2019. Now more SPACs have gone public in 2020 than in all of 2019, and we still have only about 3 months left of the year, so expect even more SPACs to go public. In terms of the data dump for investors this week, on Monday, IHS Markit will release their Purchase Managers Index for services. This is basically a survey of managers in those fields to determine overall sentiment in the market. In September, the services index was at around 54.6. That showed a slight increase in sentiment. A reading of 50 or above indicates an expansion in the market. 49 or below indicates a contraction. Figures for the U.S. trade deficit for August will come out on Tuesday. Last month, the deficit fell another $63.6 billion. More specifically, the U.S. Census Bureau reports the overall U.S. trade deficit with China, which happens to be the largest importer of U.S. goods, is to be around $163.3 billion for the year. Investors will get another round of data surrounding the U.S. jobs market when the Labor Department releases the number of job openings for August. If you remember last week, the Department of Labor released weekly jobless claims, and those fell to about 837,000, showing a bit of an uptick in the economics of the country, but still not where we need to be. In July, there were about 6.6 million job openings across the U.S. Weekly jobless claims, as per usual, will be released by the Labor Department on Thursday. Earnings reports, again, earnings calendar is relatively light this week as quarterly earnings are winding down and getting ready for the next quarter. There are no earnings reported on Monday. On Tuesday, Levi Strauss & Company and Paychex Incorporated will release their earnings. On Wednesday, Lamb Weston Holdings and RPM International will release earnings. And on Thursday, Domino's Pizza and Helen of Troy Limited will have their earnings reports released. There are no earnings reports as scheduled for Friday. That's all for me this week. I hope you had a great week and get a good jump start on this next week for the markets. So until next time, I'm Matt Clark, research analyst for Money and Markets, with your what to look for on Wall Street next week. And until then, safe trading.